Hello, my name is Holly Steen, and today I'll be sharing a presentation with you on the attacks of September 11th, 2001. I have to warn you, some of the photos I'm about to share with you and some of the stories I'm about to share with you are a little bit hard to see and hard to hear. Osama bin Laden. Osama bin Laden was the mastermind behind these September 11th attacks. His goal was to show the world that America was weak. He often referred to America as a paper lion, one that had the presence of being strong and powerful, but if attacked, would crumble. Osama bin Laden came up with the idea to fly airplanes into important buildings around the United States, buildings such as the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, and the Capitol building. The morning of September 11, 2001, 19 hijackers boarded 4 flights to carry out the deadliest terrorist attack in American history. Here you will see the flight paths that the airlines took that fateful morning. All of the airlines used in the September 11th attacks were on the East Coast heading to the West Coast. This is an important fact because they decided to use those flights due to the amount of jet fuel they would be holding. The goals of September 11th was to take as many American lives and cause as much damage to the buildings as possible, and to do so, they wanted completely full tanks of fuel. There are many heroes when it comes to September 11th. Betty Ong is one of those heroes. Betty Ong was a flight attendant for Flight 11. When Flight 11 got into the air, it was clear that something was not right. Betty Ong called American Airlines reservation desk and said that her flight had been hijacked. She explained to them that mace had been sprayed in business class, that they had stabbed a passenger who were trying to get into the cockpit, and that she could not get a hold of the pilot. Betty Ong stayed professional and calm through the entire call. Step by step, she told American Airlines what was happening aboard that flight. Betty Ong stayed on that phone with the American Airlines until her flight crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. The North Tower was hit at 8:46 a.m. When it was first hit, people thought many different things. Someone thought a bomb had gone off, and that, wasn't unheard of, as that had happened before in the World Trade Center history. Someone thought that it was a small airline that crashed in. Someone said, no, it was a big jet, but obviously the pilot had had medical issues which caused them to crash. Even though Betty Ong had called and reported the hijacking, her flight was headed to the West Coast. So they had not put it together that her flight was the one that crashed into the World Trade Center. When the flight crashed into the World Trade Center, at first people evacuated. They got down to below and they were told that they could go back up and get their stuff, their belongings. The South Tower was told to stay put, that they were fine, they were in no danger. Due to this, thousands of lives were lost. If they had evacuated both buildings right away when the plane had hit the North Tower, thousands of lives could have been saved. At 9:03 a.m., the South Tower was hit. Now, at this point, it is known that this is a terrorist attack. This isn't an accident. It's not a medical emergency. This is a terrorist attack on the American people. By the time the South Tower was hit, President Bush was in an elementary school reading to the kids when he was informed of the flights hitting the Twin Towers. At this point, it was put out that all flights in the air should be grounded. Thanks to Betty's call, they understood that it was hijacked airlines that were doing these attacks, so they grounded all flights across America. Unfortunately, getting out of the towers for some was an obstacle, trying to escape. In this picture, you'll see 2 men at the top picture. That is Brian and John. Brian and John were co-workers, and they were working up in the towers, and they were trying to get down. When they got to the 68th floor, they came across a woman in an electric wheelchair. She was trapped, that the elevators were not working, and her electric wheelchair was too heavy to try to get down the stairs. She did inform the men that there was a portable wheelchair in the janitor's closet for emergencies, and the men put her in this portable wheelchair and carried her down 68 flights of stairs. When they got to the bottom, they put her in an ambulance and sent her on her way to the hospital. It was then the men realized they had no idea what her name was or who she was. And that really shows the character of the American people coming together during these attacks. It didn't matter who you were, if you knew the person, if they knew you. Americans came together to survive the attacks of 9/11. Going down the flights of stairs was hazardous, as there was dust, there was jet fuel, there was smoke and toxins, and the people really struggled to get down. The jumpers. The jumpers of 9/11. The people who were located above where the planes hit the towers did not have an option to escape. The planes took out the elevators and they took out the stairwells. A lot of them were just trapped. All of them were trapped. And there was no way down. There was fire from the jet fuel, and jet fuel burns extremely hot. And a lot of them decided that they were not going to let the terrorists win, that they were going to take fate into their own hands, and they jumped. Approximately 200 people jumped from the Twin Towers that day. Drew Richard was a press photographer, and he decided to take pictures of the jumpers, not to be gruesome, not to cause any dishonor to the families, but to show and share their stories. Their stories matter. They were brave. They decided that they were not going to let terrorists win. They were not going to burn alive. That they were going to go out on their own will. The bottom right-hand corner is the falling man. That is one of the most famous pictures from September 11th. Some people chose to jump together. Some people chose to jump on their own. Unfortunately, the jumpers caused a lot of chaos down on the street because as people were escaping the buildings, they now had to look out for people falling from the sky and the impact of the jumpers hitting the ground. A lot of firefighters have said that that is where they get the most PTSD from, is watching the jumpers hit the ground. The Pentagon was hit at 9:37. The Pentagon had known about the attacks on the Twin Towers. A lot of them were watching the attacks in their offices. Sisters Kathy and Patty were in the lobby talking about September 11th. They decided that they were going to go home, so they both went back to their own office to gather their belongings. When the flight hit the Pentagon, Kathy was okay. She evacuated. Unfortunately, Patty was not okay, and she passed in the attacks. Her picture is below. The Pentagon was said to have a lot more damage done had it not just been recently redone. And they put up new firewalls and stronger glass, and their renovation of the Pentagon really saved lives that day. At 9:59, the South Tower collapsed. When the South Tower collapsed, the South Tower was the second tower to be hit. The people did not have as long as the North Tower to get out. When it collapsed, it took thousands of people with them. You can see the horror and the terror in the people watching from the street and the effects the South Tower collapse had on them. Flight 93. Flight 93 is huge in the September 11th story. When Flight 93 was hijacked, the people called home. When the people called home, the family members had been watching the attacks happen through the media, and they were able to tell the people on Flight 93, this is a terrorist attack. They're flying planes into buildings. The passengers on Flight 93 decided to fight back. They used boiling water and the heavy beverages carts, and they fought their hijackers. When they fought their hijackers, the hijackers realized that they could not get to their destination and put the plane down in a field in Pennsylvania. Flight 93 was scheduled to hit the Capitol building. Congress was in full session that morning. The people on Flight 93 saved thousands of lives. The North Tower collapsed at 10:28 a.m., covering New York in a field of dust. This dust covered everything, and it had lasting effects. The woman in the picture in the yellow, her name is Marcy. Marcy was deemed the Dust Lady from the September 11 attacks. She died in 2015 from cancer. The cancer is said to be related to the dust she inhaled on September 11th. Some apartment buildings nearby the towers were also affected. One lady came home to her apartment, and even though she didn't work in the World Trade Center, she was just going home, her apartment had dust and debris and even body parts from the World Trade Center in it. She said that it was horrific and it took months for her to get back in. And once she got back in, the majority of her stuff was not savable. The attacks really did affect more than just those directly affected. Ground Zero. Ground Zero became the place after the towers fell where all the debris laid was Ground Zero. Ground Zero was just as tragic as 9/11. There was thousands of people who were calling, hundreds of people who were calling and yelling out for help. Unfortunately, Ground Zero was very unstable. There was fires, there was gas pipes open, there was water lines broken, and the rescue workers just could not get to very many people. Only 11 people were pulled out of the debris after September 11th. You see in this photo, a man, police officer being pulled out. The September 11th dogs, there was 400 dogs used in September 11th for recovery. They were able to get into places that people weren't, and they were able to pull people out of the debris due to the dogs. It took hundreds of workers, rescue workers, construction workers, steel workers, to clean up the grounds of Ground Zero. It was a long, horrible task because as they were cleaning debris, they were also looking for remains. Today, they're still trying to identify some remains found at Ground Zero. America got back up. The attacks on 9/11 were horrible. They were horrible and they were gruesome and they were heartbreaking. But America did not stay down. America proves Osama bin Laden wrong. America is a force to be reckoned with. In May of 2011, the American military went and killed Osama bin Laden. New York rebuilt. New York built the One World Trade Center, which is the highest skyscraper in New York and in the Northwest Hemisphere, I believe. And they built the memorial where the Twin Towers once stood is now the reflecting pools, and they have the blue lights that shine in the sky. The blue lights went up shortly after the 9/11 attack, showing the world that, yes, our towers were attacked. Yes, we did face the terrorist attack, but the America people came together. They united together and they built the nation stronger. We have a stronger building. There's memorials. Osama bin Laden was held accountable. He was killed. And the American people came together on September 12th like never before. There were lines outside of blood banks. There were people who would drive across the country to go to Ground Zero to help clean up. The American people really became united and wanted to help one another get through this tragedy, proving that America is not weak. The people in America are extremely strong. And though the media showed the attacks of September 11th, the media also showed America rebuilding. It is important that every year on September 11th, we relive those attacks. We watch those attacks on the media, and we watch those towers fall so that we remember not only what we lost, but as a nation, what we can pull together and gain. And that was my presentation on September 11th. I hope you liked it. I would really like in the comments below for you to let me know where you were on September 11th. I would really like to hear your September 11th stories. For me, I was in high school and I was going to school and my mom called and she said, hey, the Twin Towers were just hit. If you want to come home, you can come home. And I went to school and sat in homeroom and watched the news. And then my mom texted me and said, go get your siblings and come home. And so I did. And I remember sitting at home with my parents and just watching the entire day. Just, we did not leave the TV, and it was shocking. And it was like the whole world stood still. And I remember just the sadness and the pain of September 11th. But then September 12th came, and I remember my dad, okay, we got to go donate blood. Okay, we got to put resources together to help the firefighters at Ground Zero. the church sending volunteers out to help. And I lived in Washington State, so it was all the way on the other side of the country, but yet we were so impacted and we wanted to help in any way we could. And that is the importance of September 11th, the unity and the bringing together and the supporting each other. So I'd really love to hear where everyone was on September 11th.